talk about GMs. So what is a GM? So a GM is basically someone who drives business outcomes. If we think about the defining document for a GM, it is actually a profit and loss statement. And the defining document for a PM is a roadmap. So clearly there's quite a wide gap between the two roles. And some of you may have aspirations to be a GM at some point, some of you may not. But I'm here to tell you, regardless of what your future aspirations might be, you might want to adopt a GM mindset, and it will help you tremendously in your product career. So PMs who think like GMs actually go beyond feature launches to driving business outcomes such as revenue, ARPU, cost, etc. And once PMs speak the language of GMs, they're more able to expand their influence, not just in the squad of sales, design, data science, but they're able to expand their influence across sales, finance, and operations, which is really essential to the delivery of the product, to the product earning money, and to overall the customer having a good experience. And PMs who act like GMs also get promoted faster because as you move up the ladder, you're expected to have more influence on people and more influence on outcomes. So naturally, if you do that earlier in your career, then you will get promoted faster. So it is important that if you're really thinking of moving up the ladder, that you start to expand that influence and that thinking towards more of a GM mindset. So a little bit of a deeper dive into what a GM focuses on. For a PM, they focused on feature and product success, whereas a GM is focused on the entire business line. In terms of metrics, beyond what PMs are focused on, such as adoption and retention, GMs are focused on revenue and cost margin. Decision-making, going beyond roadmap prioritization, GMs are focused on investment trade-offs and resource allocation. And when we think about collaboration, like I mentioned, this is collaboration across the org to everybody who is really involved in delivering a product to or distributing a product to the customers, ensuring that the customer has good experience like operations, but also that the product ends up making money. So let's put this in context and let's think of an example. Let's say you are building a checkout product within e-commerce. A PM might care about the conversion rate of the checkout product, but a GM is going to ask questions like, what are the fees for the different payment methods that we're going to use? Should we be directing customers from low-cost payment methods to high-cost payment methods? How has the customer mix changed or the product mix changed based on this new checkout? So there's things that they think about beyond just conversion and adoption of that checkout method. So that's what that's the difference between the two. And I'd argue that as you grow up in your career, you should really start to embody the second and start to speak the language of the second and the considerations of the second one, which is the GM, over and above just thinking from a PM lens. In terms of companies, there are a few companies where they really do encourage their PMs to act like GMs. Famous one is Stripe, where their product leads own discrete business units with dedicated resources. They are responsible for revenue. There's no sharing of resources, so that way they can really allocate it to where they see fit. Meta, specifically in the ads and monetization teams, they do drive revenue strategy and go beyond just product decisions. They may even look at specific customers, the largest customers, and think about, okay, how do I drive revenue for these largest customers, and value, obviously, for the larger customers using ads and monetization. And Airbnb, this was an older model that they had. They had their PMs lead distinct verticals like homes and experiences with revenue accountability. So these are companies that structure PM roles with GM-like ownership, which in turn accelerates career path. But I would say that, in spite of whatever model your company might have, whether they're asking you to think about things beyond just the product metric or the product trade-offs, this is still something that will help you, and I'm going to show you why. So First of all, I would say don't worry about your current position. Definitely develop the mindset, demonstrate the behaviors, the right behaviors, and the position will come. So don't worry about what is your current company structure, what they're expecting to do. I mean, definitely meet the baseline of what they're expecting you to do, but you have the flexibility and to do more and to get noticed and promoted. So what are these mindset and behavioral shifts that you need to embody in order to start thinking like more of a GM? The first is to think and speak outside the lines. I see this tendency with product managers, especially with the more junior ones, that there is always a need to speak inside the lines and really whenever you're going for a meeting, maybe it's a meeting for cross-product prioritization or making a decision within the product portfolio, the PMs are still advocating for their own product. I would encourage you to sort of put that hat off and say, okay, what is my VP thinking? What is my director thinking? And, what is the right decision for the product portfolio as a whole and for the company as a whole? And if you can start thinking along those lines and start advocating and lobbying around those lines, then you really show that you are thinking at a much higher altitude than someone that might, whatever is expected at your level. The other thing to do is definitely educate yourself about different pieces of your company, such as how sales in your company works, how are the salespeople, selling the products. And I would encourage you to go beyond just maybe sales content, which is what you're probably reviewing today as well, to understanding kind of their incentive structure. If it's a multi-product portfolio company, how do they kind of sequence different products? When do they introduce it? To really understand how it impacts the adoption of your specific product. Also financial metrics, so understanding obviously basics of how your product makes money, but also really the entire economics and the P&L of your product, because these things will really position you to think more holistically about your product as you go forward. The other very important thing is having relationships with key stakeholders in sales, finance, and ops. I've put directors here because, they're the ones who are really making decisions on focus areas, on resource allocation. So by understanding how they think, how they make decisions, what's top of mind for them, you really get closer to the pulse of what's happening within sales, finance, ops, et cetera, all these other teams. So understand what's top of mind for them. And what you can offer them in return is the product vision, where you're going with the product, what's happening in the next few months, and also cross-pollination of information. Like a finance director might be interested in some of the nitty-gritty of sales and how customers are responding to various offerings, but they may not necessarily have that piece of information. So by you cross-pollinating this information that you have in speaking to multiple functions, you're actually providing value back to them. So that's how you can kind of have a constructive conversation with each other where you're building the relationship, but also sharing information that then enhances everyone's holistic understanding of the product, the sales, and the value proposition that's overall provided to the customer. These relationships will actually be critical later on in a couple of different ways. Best case scenario, you become, you're really seen as an expert on the product and beyond, and you're called in to make certain trade-offs or opine on certain decisions. But if not, I would say even having a close relationship with some of these folks will help you when, let's say, something's going wrong with your product. Maybe, the numbers are not performing, or and so then if you can speak to the sales director or the finance director or their teams, then you will get a sense of what's really going on, and that's just going to be helpful for you to calibrate and move forward from that point on. The last thing to tie all this up is I would say have a sense of extreme ownership. If something is not going well, feel free to ask why, what's next. Again, even if it's beyond your little squad of eng, design, data science, etc. Act like a steward for the company. Act like a steward for the company's success. If you start acting like that, you will in turn be respected and seen as someone who really always wants to do the best thing for the company and customer, and is really just advocating, asking questions, and pushing on behalf of that agenda. So again, super important to really tie all of these together and really sort of, get you to be seen as more senior, more influential within your organization. So first, we have to think like a GM. We have to act like a GM. But then let's think about, okay, how do I demonstrate that, I have this high level of thinking, this very holistic level of thinking to people around me, to my manager, my skip level, and then, all my peers, and then my manager's peers as well, right? So one thing that you can do is to own a business metric, not just a product metric. Now, I understand, there might be sort of organizational, rules or something around this of who owns what metrics. But so if you can't directly own it, then at least sort of, talk about it. Maybe talk about it secondary to the metrics you actually own, but always kind of keep it in mind. And whenever you're making certain decisions or trade-offs, bring it up as something worth considering. Go beyond product trade-offs, right? There are trade-offs in ROI, there's trade-offs in feature choices. Be cognizant of making these decisions holistically. So as an example, let's say you are launching personalized recommendations for something. Consider not just the click-through rate of the recommendation, but is it actually driving sales? Consider, the cost of, if you're using some AI ML model or something, what is the cost of that AI ML model? Is it really, is it sufficiently covering, and is it providing the ROI needed, vis-a-vis the benefit, right? So think about all these things. Again, depending on how your company is structured, you don't have to make it like your primary focus in your presentations, your conversations, your briefs, but you can still kind of allude to it and show that you're thinking holistically and that you're capable of thinking in this holistic way. Lead beyond product, right? Work with sales, finance, ops. These are things that your directors, your VPs, they're probably already doing, but that doesn't mean that you can't also, do the same and then take some of the load off them. Get involved in pricing discussions, in cost optimization discussions. These will both be helpful for you to learn and broaden your own horizons, but also to be really seen as this leader within the company. Think in investments, not just features, right? Treat every initiative like a business case with an ROI. So let's say you are launching something and you're trying to decide if it should be a free versus a paid feature. Think about, should this be a part of the free tier? Or is it valuable enough to upsell? If we do make it free, does it help increase retention? Does it increase support costs? So think about everything, all the different functions within the organization and how they deliver value to the customer, and how any feature affects all those different value sources, and how that ultimately affects the ROI. So these are some ways you can demonstrate it. Again, you will have to contextualize it for your company and what makes sense and what people around you are responding to, and what you feel like, okay, maybe this is not the right time. And then you'll kind of find the sweet spot of what you really should be doing. But I do have to say, don't let go of your valuable product hat, right? This is hard-earned experience that you have earned over multiple years, and no one else can do your job for a reason. Do not optimize for short-term revenue, but just build features and grow engagement, or rather don't build features and grow engagement that has no impact to the bottom line. So you want to be able to balance both, and that you then can have the golden outcome in the middle, which is sustainable growth. So you are a steward for the customer, the customer best, and how the customers interact with your technology product. Continue to be stewards of that, but also think about these other things. Think in terms of customer lifetime value and not just short-term adoption. So, all this to say that you are in a great position to start thinking like a GM. I think thinking like a GM will accelerate your career. You will have to kind of feel it out within your organization of what makes sense to focus on and what doesn't. So I would encourage you to really ask yourself, how can you start shifting your thinking to be more GM-like this month? Remember, GMs are not built in a day. but you can definitely start your journey today and start thinking like a GM more and more every day. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to take a look at the questions. I actually don't know where to start from. Okay, cool. So PM is product manager, yes. Okay, great. GM here means general manager. So this may be a formal role in some companies. In some companies, it is not. But someone who really, you can see someone who's really responsible for two things. One is a company outcomes like revenue cost, basically P&L. And the other is resource allocation, directing of resources to really marshal those outcomes and achieve those outcomes for the company. Okay. Yeah, so it may be one level below the CPO. It may be the CPO. It may be sometimes it's like a sales leader or revenue leader. So it could be any of those depending on how the company is structured. Yeah. Yeah, general manager is a normal role. You're right, in retail, restaurants, sports, and entertainment. But actually, a lot of tech companies have also have started to have this role as well. The GM might be more sort of sales focused or revenue focused, product focused, technology focused, depending on the kind of product that it is, so that the GM really matches the skill set of what the product is. In tech, they also name it something else. Do you mind telling us what they name it? I've mostly seen like head of business, GM, general manager, etc. Or someone is informally playing the role, even though their functional role might be something else. All right, cool. I think those are all the questions.
It looks like Judy asked how you address pressure to include features because the competition have those features.
Oh yeah, good question. So I think obviously there is an element of keeping up with the competition, but you need to kind of rationalize if the whatever that feature is right for your customer base and your product in the current state that it is. And so basically kind of answer the why and why now question in the context of your company and your product. And I would say if it's not the right thing that you feel strongly about it, you should definitely push back, but go with a strong rationale of why you think that it shouldn't be included. And I would even say go a step beyond that and say, hey, I don't think we should do X, Y, Z, but let's do A because it's going to achieve the same outcome. And it's something our customers have been asking for and makes more sense for our customer base and our sort of product maturity. So present an alternative so that you can kind of redirect the attention to like, oh, wait, we can also do this other thing that's going to give us the same outcome that's better suited.